Hello and welcome back. So in the previous video we have gone over creating a Java project and pulling in files, importing files. So in this video I want to actually go over the code in the tutorial.java before we do the coverage of the code coverage and data coverage in next videos. So I'm going to open tutorial project and we have a file tutorial.java. I'm going to make it bigger. So obviously the class name is tutorial, right? The name of the file and the class name have to be the same in Java. And it has two attributes, right? It has this first attribute called attr_int, which stands for attribute integer. And the second one, attr string, attribute string. Those are just the names I chose for this particular file. Something to remember that in Java you want the attributes to be named for whatever they represent. Well, in this tutorial I'm not really doing any real things, so I just chose names to be meaningful for the data types they hold. But if we're doing a car, for example, a car class, and the attributes might have been an engine, well then, and some value for an engine, let's say engine model, well then I would actually call my attribute engine part or engine number or whatever it might be, right? You want them to be meaningful. Alright, so again, attribute first is my integer, second one is my string. Then I have a constructor, right? A constructor is a special type of structure which gets called in order to create the object. So it's always public, well not always, but usually it's public because otherwise you wouldn't be able to use it to create the object. And the name of the constructor is always the same name as the class. That's what makes it a constructor. If it was any other name, it would be a method instead of constructor. So then the constructor can take arguments or it does not, depending what you're trying to do. So this particular constructor is my default constructor with no parameters, and what it's doing is it's initializing my two attributes to values. So makes the attribute integer -1, and it makes the attribute string, the string N-O-N-E, all small caps, none, right? So that's all this constructor is doing. It has two statements. Each statement is an assignment statement. Okay, then we have a second constructor. Now my second constructor is taking two parameters. It's taking the first parameter called num of type integer, and it's taking second parameter called string, str, of type string, right? And the comments tell you what this method, or I'm sorry, what this constructor is supposed to do, right? So it's supposed to throw illegal argument exception if the values that are passed to the parameters are invalid, and then tells you what the exception message should be, and some qualifications what the parameter values can and cannot be, all right? So let's look at it. So the first if statement, which is a branch statement, what it's doing is it's checking that the value of the num parameter is exactly what it's supposed to be based on what the comment said. So num parameter must be greater than 0 and less than 5. So what it's doing is it's saying, okay, if the value of num is less than 0 or the num value is greater than 5, then it's going to throw this exception, right? So it's throwing no pointer exception, and the exception message is what's in the parameters. First parameter must be greater than 0 and less than 5. Okay, so again, this is an if statement. It has two clauses, and if either clause is true, if either clause is false, it throws the no pointer exception. Then we have else, right? Otherwise, if both of these values are fine, then we check the string parameter. So it checks if string is empty string or it has a null value. Then again we throw a illegal argument exception, and what's in the parameters is the exception message, right? So again, first it's checking the first parameter, and then it's checking the second parameter. If the parameters are not valid values, then it's throwing these exceptions. And then the next two statements are just assignment statements, because at this point we should have checked that both num and string are valid value, have valid values, and so we assign the value of num to our attribute integer, and we assign the value of str parameter to the attribute string. Did I say that right? We assign the str parameter to the attribute string. Okay, so that's what the constructor does. Then we have a couple get methods. All the get methods do are returning the current value of our attribute. So get attribute integer returns the value of attribute integer, get attribute string returns the attribute string, right? Simple. And then the last method we happen to have here, what it does is it comment tells you, right? It says concatenates the value of attribute string by the value of attribute integer and puts spaces between them. So for example, if my attribute int is 2 and my attribute string is num, the string num, num, right? What the result should be is num space num space, right? That's what the string should look like. And it tells you that if it will return empty string if the attribute integer is less than or equals 0, right? So if we have negative number or if we have a 0, then it's just going to return empty string. So the first thing inside of this method that happens is we evaluate, or we assign the string result to be empty string, so such that if we never go inside of the while loop, we just return that value, right? Empty string. Otherwise, we're going to loop inside of the while loop for as many times as the value of our attribute integer. So if attribute integer is 1, it's going to loop through once. If it's 2, it's going to loop through twice, and so forth, right? And then each time it loops through, it's going to append to the existing string, which is result. That's where we're holding a existing string. It's going to append the value of attribute string and a space after it, right? So again, it's going to keep looping through for as long as attribute integer is greater than 0. So the second statement we have here is just controlling the loop, so that each time we go through loop, it decrements, right? It takes away 1 from our current value of attribute int, so that at the end it's going to eventually it's going to be 0, right? And it's going to exit the loop. Okay, so that's it for this file, and I will see you in the next video.